The silence was deafening, broken only by the rhythmic tick of the grandfather clock in the hall, a clock that had measured generations of my family's triumphs and tragedies. Now it seemed to mock my despair. The bank statement felt like a brand to my skin, the numbers blurring through the film of tears that refused to stop. They thought I was helpless. They thought they had won, but they underestimated a grandmother's love and a lifetime of playing the long game. If you have a family, a mother, a father, a brother, a sister, show them you care by subscribing now, because family is all that truly matters. My name is Hazel, and until recently I was living a quiet, comfortable life in a small town nestled in the heartland of America. My days were filled with tending my garden, volunteering at the local library, and spoiling my grandchildren rotten, especially little Timmy, who always had a way of making me smile, even on the cloudiest of days. Life wasn't extravagant, but it was good. I had my health, a loving family, and enough put away to ensure my golden years were truly golden. Or so I thought. Everything changed the day the lottery numbers matched. $333 million. An obscene amount of money that could alter the trajectory of not just my life, but the lives of my entire family for generations to come. But I also knew that sudden wealth could corrupt, could twist even the most well-intentioned individuals into something unrecognizable. So I decided to keep it a secret shared only with Timmy, my rock, my confidant, the one person I knew I could trust implicitly. He helped me set up an anonymous trust, shielding my identity from the ravenous eyes of the world. We agreed. No one could know. Not yet. I wanted to observe, to assess, to see who truly loved me for me, and who was simply after a piece of the pie. The temptation to shout it from the rooftops was immense, but I resisted. I continued my routine, pretending nothing had changed. I wore the same clothes, drove the same car, and lived in the same modest home. The only difference was the weight of the secret, a heavy burden that both thrilled and terrified me. Then the coincidences started. Unexpected calls from family members I hadn't heard from in years, suddenly eager to reconnect. Invitations to lavish dinners, thinly veiled attempts to subtly inquire about my financial well-being. I played along, feigning ignorance, deflecting their probing questions with practiced ease. Inside, however, a cold dread began to creep in. I had always considered my family close-knit, a bastion of unwavering support and unconditional love. But now I saw a different side, a darker undercurrent of greed and self-interest that I had never suspected existed. I decided to put them to the test, a cruel but necessary experiment to reveal their true colors. I started struggling.
Complaining about rising medical bills, hinting at the possibility of losing my home, painting a picture of impending financial ruin. The reactions were enlightening. Some offered empty platitudes, their concern as shallow as a puddle. Others subtly distanced themselves, their visits becoming less frequent, their calls growing shorter. Only Timmy remained steadfast, his unwavering support a beacon of hope in the gathering storm. The person I trusted most was one of them. The silence was deafening, broken only by the rhythmic tick of the grandfather clock in the hall, a clock that had measured generations of my family's triumphs and tragedies. Now it seemed to mock my despair. The bank statement felt like a brand to my skin, the numbers blurring through the film of tears that refused to stop. They thought I was helpless. They thought they had won. But they underestimated a grandmother's love and a lifetime of playing the long game. If you have a family, a mother, a father, a brother, a sister, show them you care by subscribing now, because family is all that truly matters. My name is Hazel, and until recently, I was living a quiet, comfortable life in a small town nestled in the heartland of America. My days were filled with tending my garden, volunteering at the local library, and spoiling my grandchildren rotten, especially little Timmy, who always had a way of making me smile, even on the cloudiest of days. Life wasn't extravagant, but it was good. I had my health, a loving family, and enough put away to ensure my golden years were truly golden. Or so I thought. Everything changed the day the lottery numbers matched. $333 million. an obscene amount of money that could alter the trajectory of not just my life, but the lives of my entire family for generations to come. But I also knew that sudden wealth could corrupt, could twist even the most well-intentioned individuals into something unrecognizable. So I decided to keep it a secret shared only with Timmy, my rock, my confidant, the one person I knew I could trust implicitly. He helped me set up an anonymous trust, shielding my identity from the ravenous eyes of the world. We agreed. No one could know. Not yet. I wanted to observe, to assess, to see who truly loved me for me, and who was simply after a piece of the pie. The temptation to shout it from the rooftops was immense, but I resisted. I continued my routine, pretending nothing had changed. I wore the same clothes, drove the same car, and lived in the same modest home. The only difference was the weight of the secret, a heavy burden that both thrilled and terrified me. Then the coincidences started. Unexpected calls from family members I hadn't heard from in years, suddenly eager to reconnect, invitations to lavish dinners, thinly veiled attempts to subtly inquire about my financial well-being. I played along, feigning ignorance, deflecting their probing questions with practiced ease.
Inside, however, a cold dread began to creep in. I had always considered my family close-knit, a bastion of unwavering support and unconditional love. But now I saw a different side, a darker undercurrent of greed and self-interest that I had never suspected existed. I decided to put them to the test, a cruel but necessary experiment to reveal their true colors. I started struggling, complaining about rising medical bills, hinting at the possibility of losing my home, painting a picture of impending financial ruin. The reactions were enlightening. Some offered empty platitudes, their concern as shallow as a puddle. Others subtly distanced themselves, their visits becoming less frequent, their calls growing shorter. Only Timmy remained steadfast, his unwavering support a beacon of hope in the gathering storm. The person I trusted most was one of them. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife. It wasn't just the money. It was the violation of trust, the shattering of the bond I thought unbreakable. It turned out Timmy, sweet, innocent Timmy, had been confiding in my nephew, Mark. Mark, the slick, fast-talking charmer who always seemed to be one step ahead of everyone else. Apparently, Timmy, bless his heart, thought Mark could offer sound financial advice. The naivete stung. Mark, of course, saw the opportunity for what it was, a chance to weasel his way into my fortune. He started subtly suggesting investments, high-risk ventures that promised astronomical returns. I played along, pretending to be swayed by his persuasive rhetoric. I even invested a small sum, just enough to keep him hooked. But all the while, I was documenting everything, every phone call, every email, every shady proposal. I installed hidden cameras in my home, capturing their clandestine meetings, their whispered conversations filled with avarice and deceit. Sleepless nights became the norm. The weight of the betrayal pressed down on me, suffocating me with its immense gravity. I found myself staring at the ceiling for hours, replaying their conversations in my head, searching for some glimmer of hope, some sign that I had misjudged them. But there was nothing, only the cold, hard reality of their treachery. My garden, once a source of solace and joy, became a desolate wasteland. The vibrant colors seemed to fade, mirroring the emptiness I felt inside. The laughter of my grandchildren, once music to my ears, now sounded like a distant echo, a painful reminder of the innocence I was desperately trying to protect. I tried to confide in my friends, but I couldn't bring myself to reveal the truth. The shame was too overwhelming, the fear of judgment too profound. I isolated myself, retreating into a shell of silence and solitude.
The pressure mounted. Mark's investments started going south, or so he claimed. He became more persistent, more demanding, his charming facade slowly crumbling to reveal the ruthless manipulator beneath. He pressured me to sell my home, to liquidate my assets, to entrust him with everything. I resisted, of course, but his tactics grew increasingly aggressive. He started spreading rumors about my mental state, suggesting I was becoming senile, incapable of managing my own affairs. He even contacted my doctor, attempting to manipulate him into declaring me incompetent. That was the last straw. The day he tried to take away my autonomy, to strip me of my dignity, was the day I decided enough was enough. I knew I couldn't let them win. I couldn't let them destroy everything I had worked so hard to build. It was time to turn the tables. It was time for revenge. I started by subtly withdrawing the investments Mark had managed, transferring the funds to a secure offshore account. I then began to systematically dismantle his carefully constructed web of lies, gathering evidence of his fraudulent activities, his shady dealings, his blatant disregard for the law. I discovered he had been embezzling funds from his own company, using the money to fund his lavish lifestyle. I uncovered a trail of unpaid debts, disgruntled investors, and broken promises. The more I dug, the more dirt I found. It was like peeling back the layers of an onion, each layer revealing a new level of corruption and depravity. My hands trembled as I gathered the evidence, my heart pounding in my chest. This wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about justice. It was about holding them accountable for their actions, for the pain they had inflicted on me and my family. The day they served me the papers was the day the world went silent. Guardianship. Mark, with Timmy's unwitting assistance, was petitioning the court to declare me incompetent, to seize control of my life and my assets. The audacity of it stole my breath. I remember staring at the legal jargon, the accusations of mental decline, the thinly veiled insults disguised as concern, and feeling a cold, unfamiliar rage building inside me. My hands trembled so violently I could barely hold the documents. The room seemed to shrink, the walls closing in, suffocating me with their suffocating judgment. It wasn't just the money anymore. It was my freedom, my dignity, my very identity they were trying to steal. I wanted to scream, to lash out, to shatter the carefully constructed facade of civility they had so meticulously maintained. But I couldn't. I was trapped, cornered, seemingly powerless against their calculated scheme. The humiliation was unbearable. The thought of being stripped of my rights, of being reduced to a helpless pawn in their greedy game, filled me with a despair so profound it threatened to consume me whole. That night, I didn't sleep.
I sat in the darkness, the legal documents scattered around me like fallen leaves, the rhythmic tick of the grandfather clock a constant, mocking reminder of the passage of time. I replayed the events of the past few months in my head, searching for some way out, some glimmer of hope, but all I saw was betrayal, deceit, and the crushing weight of their conspiracy. The iron scent of despair hung heavy in the air. The image of Timmy's trusting face haunted me, his innocent eyes reflecting the darkness that had enveloped our family. I felt like I had failed him, that I had allowed my own naivete to put him in harm's way. The weight of that realization was almost too much to bear. I wandered through the house like a ghost, the familiar surroundings now alien and menacing. The garden, once a sanctuary, was overgrown and neglected, mirroring the state of my own soul. The vibrant colors had faded, replaced by a dull, lifeless gray. Even the birds seemed to have abandoned their songs, their silence adding to the oppressive atmosphere. I found myself staring at my reflection in the mirror, barely recognizing the woman staring back. Her eyes were hollow and sunken, her face etched with lines of worry and exhaustion. The spark of life that had once burned so brightly had been extinguished, replaced by a flicker of fear and resignation. I felt like I was drowning, sinking deeper and deeper into a sea of despair, with no hope of rescue. The thought of simply giving up crossed my mind, of surrendering to their machinations, of allowing them to take everything I had worked so hard to achieve. But then I thought of my late husband, Thomas, of his unwavering integrity, his fierce determination, his unyielding belief in justice. I remembered the lessons he had taught me, the values he had instilled in me, the strength he had always seen within me, and I knew I couldn't let him down. I couldn't let them tarnish his memory, to undermine everything he had stood for. I had to fight back, not just for myself, but for him, for our family, for everything we had built together. As the first rays of dawn crept through the window, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, a new resolve began to stir within me. The fear and despair didn't disappear entirely, but they were tempered by a growing sense of determination. I would not be a victim. I would not be silenced. I would not let them take everything from me. I would use their own greed and arrogance against them. I would turn their carefully constructed plan into their ultimate downfall. I started by meticulously reviewing the legal documents, searching for any loopholes, any inconsistencies, any weaknesses in their case. I contacted a lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Sarah,
who saw through their charade immediately and was willing to fight for me, even against seemingly insurmountable odds. Together, we began to build a defense, gathering evidence to refute their claims, to expose their lies, to reveal their true motives. I started documenting everything, every interaction, every phone call, every email. I installed a sophisticated surveillance system in my home, capturing their every move, their every word. I became a meticulous observer, a silent strategist, watching them carefully, waiting for the opportune moment to strike. The old Hazel was gone, replaced by a new, steely-eyed woman, fueled by a burning desire for justice. They thought they had broken me. They thought they had won. But they had underestimated the power of a grandmother's love and the cunning of a woman who had spent a lifetime playing the long game. The game was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning, and this time I was playing to win. The clock was ticking. I smiled. I played their game, attending the court-mandated evaluations, acting confused and disoriented. But I was recording everything, documenting their every lie, their every manipulation. Sarah, my lawyer, was a master strategist. She advised me to appear vulnerable, to let them underestimate me, to lull them into a false sense of security. It was agonizing, but I knew it was necessary. Every time Mark smirked, every time Timmy looked at me with a mixture of pity and guilt, the crimson of rage burned hotter within me. I spent hours poring over legal documents, researching forensic accounting, learning the intricacies of corporate fraud. I discovered that Mark had been siphoning money from his company for years, using shell corporations and offshore accounts to hide his illicit activities. The evidence was damning, a smoking gun that would not only discredit him, but also land him in serious legal trouble. The surveillance system I had installed was working flawlessly, capturing their every move, their every conversation. I watched them scheme and plot, their faces contorted with greed and malice. I listened to them disparage me, mock my intelligence, and revel in their impending victory. Each recording was like a nail in their coffin, a piece of evidence that would ultimately seal their fate. One afternoon, while Mark was visiting, he made a comment about tidying up the house, suggesting I had too many breakable things. It was a thinly veiled threat, a clear indication that he was planning something sinister. I pretended not to notice, but I immediately contacted Sarah, who arranged for a team of forensic specialists to sweep the house for any potential tampering. They discovered that Mark had been subtly altering my medication, slowly increasing the dosage of my sleeping pills to further impair my cognitive function. It was a close call, a chilling reminder of the depths of their depravity. I had to be more careful. I couldn't afford to let them catch me off guard. The anticipation was building, the moment of reckoning drawing ever closer.
I could almost taste the sweetness of revenge, the satisfaction of watching their carefully constructed world crumble around them. The key to their downfall, I realized, was Timmy. He was their weakness, their Achilles heel. Despite his involvement in the guardianship petition, I knew deep down that he was a good kid, manipulated by Mark's persuasive influence. He was young and impressionable, blinded by Mark's promises of financial security. I decided to reach out to him, to appeal to his conscience, to show him the truth. I arranged a secret meeting, away from Mark's watchful eyes. It was a risky move, but I knew it was necessary. I met Timmy at a small park near his school, a place filled with childhood memories and innocent laughter. As soon as he saw me, his face flushed with guilt. He stammered and apologized, his eyes filled with tears. I held his hand, looked him directly in the eye, and told him I understood. I explained Mark's deception, showed him the evidence of his fraud, revealed his true motives. At first, he refused to believe me, clinging to the image of Mark as a benevolent mentor. But as I presented the irrefutable proof, his resistance began to crumble. He saw the truth, the ugly reality of Mark's betrayal. The realization hit him hard, shattering his innocence and leaving him devastated. He broke down, sobbing uncontrollably, begging for my forgiveness. I hugged him tightly, assuring him that everything would be all right. I told him that it wasn't too late to make things right, to redeem himself. I asked him to testify in court, to tell the truth about Mark's scheme, to expose his lies. It was a difficult decision for him, but he agreed. He knew it was the right thing to do, the only way to atone for his mistakes. With Timmy on my side, I knew we had a fighting chance. The tide was turning. The day before the hearing, I received a threatening phone call. It was Mark, his voice cold and menacing. He warned me to drop the case, to stop interfering in his plans. He threatened to expose my lottery winnings, to unleash a swarm of unwanted attention on my family. He even alluded to harming Timmy if I didn't comply. I refused to be intimidated. I told him that I wasn't afraid of him, that I would never back down. I hung up the phone, my heart pounding in my chest, my hands trembling with rage. I knew I was playing a dangerous game, but I was prepared to risk everything to protect my family and expose the truth. That night, I barely slept. I lay awake in bed, replaying Mark's threats in my mind, wondering if I had underestimated him. I knew he was capable of anything, that he would stop at nothing to get what he wanted. I checked the surveillance cameras repeatedly, ensuring that the house was secure, that Timmy was safe. I felt like I was living in a thriller, constantly on edge, waiting for the next shoe to drop. But I refused to be paralyzed by fear. I had come too far to give up now.
I had a plan, a strategy, and the unwavering support of my family and friends. I was ready for whatever Mark threw at me. The clock was ticking. The final showdown was imminent. The morning of the hearing dawned gray and overcast, mirroring the storm brewing inside me. As I dressed, I felt a strange sense of calm, a quiet confidence that belied the turmoil within. I knew this was it, the moment of truth. Everything I had worked for, everything I had sacrificed, was about to come to fruition. I arrived at the courthouse with Sarah and Timmy, bracing myself for the inevitable confrontation. Mark was already there, surrounded by his lawyers, his face a mask of arrogance and self-assurance. He smirked as I walked past, his eyes filled with disdain. I ignored him, focusing on the task at hand. As we entered the courtroom, I felt a wave of apprehension wash over me. The room was packed with spectators, reporters, and family members, all eager to witness the unfolding drama. The judge, a stern-faced woman with a reputation for fairness, called the hearing to order. The proceedings began with Mark's lawyers presenting their case, painting a picture of me as a senile, incompetent old woman, incapable of managing my own affairs. They presented fabricated evidence, twisted facts, and outright lies. I listened patiently, my hands clenched in my lap, waiting for my turn to speak. When it was my turn, Sarah stood and presented our defense. She systematically dismantled Mark's case, exposing his lies, refuting his claims, and presenting the irrefutable evidence of his fraud and manipulation. She called Timmy to the stand, who tearfully confessed his role in Mark's scheme and apologized for his betrayal. His testimony was devastating, shattering Mark's credibility and exposing his true nature. The courtroom erupted in gasps and whispers. Mark's face turned crimson with rage, his carefully constructed facade crumbling before his eyes. The moment Sarah presented the evidence of Mark's fraudulent activities, the air in the courtroom crackled with anticipation. I watched as his carefully constructed world began to crumble, his face contorted in a mask of disbelief and fury. The shell corporations, the offshore accounts, the years of deception, all laid bare for everyone to see. But the real bombshell was yet to come. Hidden deep within Mark's financial records, Sarah had discovered something even more damning, evidence that linked him to the disappearance of my late husband's business partner, David. David had vanished without a trace 5 years prior, leaving behind a mountain of debt and a cloud of suspicion. The police had investigated, but the case had gone cold, eventually filed away as an unsolved mystery. I had always suspected foul play, but I never had any proof. Now Sarah had found it. It turned out that David had stumbled upon Mark's embezzlement scheme and threatened to expose him. Mark, desperate to protect his empire, had silenced him.
The evidence was circumstantial, but it was enough to reopen the investigation and put Mark squarely in the crosshairs. As Sarah revealed this shocking information, a collective gasp filled the courtroom. The reporters scribbled furiously, their pens racing across their notepads. The judge stared at Mark with a mixture of shock and disgust. Even his own lawyers seemed stunned, their faces pale with apprehension. Mark's carefully crafted image as a successful businessman and devoted family man was shattered, replaced by the chilling reality of a ruthless criminal. The chaos in the courtroom was deafening. Mark, finally losing control, lunged across the table, attempting to silence Sarah. Court officers immediately restrained him, dragging him away as he screamed threats and accusations. I sat there, watching the scene unfold, a sense of grim satisfaction washing over me. The years of betrayal, the constant manipulation, the relentless attacks, it was all coming to an end. But I knew this was just the beginning. The legal battles would be long and arduous, but I was prepared to fight. I had the truth on my side, and I had the unwavering support of my family and friends. As Mark was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, he turned and glared at me, his eyes filled with pure malice. "This isn't over, Hazel," he hissed. "You'll pay for this." I simply smiled, a cold, unwavering smile that sent a shiver down his spine. "Oh, Mark," I replied, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "It's just beginning." The judge declared a recess, and the courtroom emptied, leaving me alone with Sarah and Timmy. Timmy rushed to my side, his face streaked with tears. "Grandma, I'm so sorry," he sobbed. "I didn't know. I never would have done this if I had known." I hugged him tightly, assuring him that I forgave him. "It's okay, Timmy," I said. "The important thing is that you told the truth. You did the right thing." Sarah patted me on the back, her eyes filled with admiration. "You did it, Hazel," she said. "You exposed him." I nodded, a sense of quiet triumph washing over me. "Not yet, Sarah," I said. "The final act is yet to come." The following days were a whirlwind of activity. The media descended upon my home, clamoring for interviews and information. The police reopened the investigation into David's disappearance, focusing their attention on Mark. His company's stock plummeted, his reputation ruined, his empire crumbling before his eyes. He was a pariah, shunned by his friends and colleagues, ostracized by society. But Mark was not one to go down without a fight. He hired a team of high-powered lawyers, attempting to discredit Sarah's evidence, to shift the blame, to salvage what was left of his life. He launched a smear campaign against me, accusing me of being a bitter, vengeful old woman, obsessed with destroying him. He even tried to bribe Timmy into recanting his testimony, but Timmy refused. He had made his choice, and he was determined to stand by it. I knew Mark was desperate, that he was capable of anything. I had to be careful to protect myself and my family from his wrath. I increased the security around my home, installed additional surveillance cameras, and hired a private investigator to monitor his movements. I knew he was planning something, that he was plotting his revenge. I just didn't know when or how he would strike. The waiting was agonizing, the tension unbearable. But I refused to be intimidated. I would not let him break me. I would not let him win. One evening, as I was reviewing the surveillance footage, I noticed something strange. A black car had been parked across the street from my house for several hours. The car was nondescript, the windows tinted, making it impossible to see inside. I zoomed in on the license plate, running it through the police database. The car was registered to a shell corporation, a company with no known assets or employees. It was a dead end. But something about the car felt wrong. I had a gut feeling that it was connected to Mark, that he was watching me, waiting for an opportunity to strike. I immediately contacted the private investigator, giving him the license plate number and asking him to track the car. He promised to look into it and get back to me as soon as possible. As I waited for his call, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. I felt like I was being hunted, that I was living in a thriller. I checked the locks on the doors and windows, making sure everything was secure. I armed the alarm system, setting it to maximum sensitivity. I even considered spending the night at a hotel, but I refused to be driven from my home. I had worked too hard for everything I had, and I wasn't going to let Mark take it away from me. I sat in the living room, staring at the surveillance monitor, watching the black car across the street. The hours ticked by, each one feeling like an eternity. The phone finally rang. It was the private investigator. "I've got some bad news, Hazel," he said. "That car you saw? It's registered to a known associate of Mark, a guy with a record for violence. He's bad news." My heart sank. I knew what this meant. Mark was planning something drastic, something that would put my life in danger. "What should I do?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Get out of the house, Hazel," he said.
Now, don't wait, just leave." But it was too late. As he spoke those words, the lights in my house flickered and died. The surveillance monitor went blank. The alarm system fell silent. I was plunged into darkness, alone and vulnerable. Then I heard a noise, a soft scraping sound coming from the back door. Someone was trying to break in. My blood ran cold. I grabbed the first thing I could find, a heavy glass vase, and held it tightly in my hands. I crept towards the back door, my heart pounding in my chest. The scraping sound grew louder, more insistent. I knew they were about to get in.
I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation. The door burst open, and a figure stepped into the room. A shadowy figure, silhouetted against the moonlight. I raised the vase above my head, ready to strike. "Who's there?" I shouted, my voice trembling. The figure didn't answer. It simply lunged towards me, a glint of metal flashing in its hand. I screamed, swinging the vase with all my might. It connected with a sickening thud, and a figure collapsed to the floor. I stood there, panting, my body shaking, staring at the motionless figure at my feet. The crimson was already starting to spread. But then, I heard another noise, a noise coming from the front of the house. More figures were entering. I was surrounded. The trap had been sprung. Darkness. Panic clawed at my throat. I knew they were inside, but they didn't know I was ready. The figure on the floor, it was a setup, a distraction. I hadn't unalived him, just stunned him. My real target was the security system. I'd rewired it weeks ago, anticipating this attack. The failure was me triggering its backup. Now the house was sealed, every window, every door locked, and the real trap was armed. They thought they were hunting me, but they had just walked into my cage. The backup generator kicked in, bathing the house in an eerie red emergency light. The figures froze. Confusion warred with dawning horror on their faces. That's when the speakers blared to life. Mark's voice, recorded weeks ago during one of his many tirades, filled the house. His threats, his admissions of guilt, his boasts about how untouchable he was, every word crystal clear. He'd unknowingly provided the soundtrack to his own downfall. The screams started soon after. Not from me, from them. The recordings I had, they weren't just of Mark. I had captured every conversation, every shady deal, every whispered threat, and now their own words were their undoing. They turned on each other, accusations flying, alliances shattering. The house became a theater of betrayal, mirroring the betrayal they had inflicted on me. Then the police arrived, not because they were called, but because I had called them days ago with an anonymous tip about a major crime about to take place in my address. I'd staged the scene perfectly, ensuring that when they arrived, they would walk into a ready-made crime scene, complete with confessions and perpetrators. The officers moved swiftly, securing the premises and taking everyone into custody. Mark arrived later, his face a mask of fury and disbelief. He saw his associates being led away in handcuffs, heard his own voice echoing from the speakers, and his eyes locked with mine. In that moment, the arrogance that had defined him vanished, replaced by a raw, animalistic fear.
The trial was a formality. The evidence was overwhelming. Mark and his cronies were convicted on multiple counts of fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. The investigation into David's disappearance was reopened, and new evidence quickly surfaced, directly implicating Mark in his unaliving. He was sentenced to life in prison, his empire reduced to ashes. Timmy testified again, his voice strong and clear, finally free from Mark's influence. He started therapy, working to heal the scars of his manipulation. Sarah continued to be my rock, her loyalty unwavering. The media frenzy eventually died down. My life returned to a semblance of normalcy. But something had changed. I was no longer the naive, trusting old woman they had tried to exploit. I had seen the darkness, and I had emerged stronger. I sat on my porch, watching the sunset. The air was still, the world at peace. I thought about Mark, locked away in a cell, his life in ruins. I felt no joy, no triumph, only a profound sense of relief. The threat was gone. My family was safe. Justice had been served. They lost everything. I just smiled. Revenge isn't sweet. It's necessary. It's about protecting what's yours. It's about standing up to those who seek to do you harm.
It's about ensuring that they pay the price for their actions. The world needed to know that Hazel wasn't a pushover. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more justice.